When I first saw her, I thought I'd found a one real, honest, different. She spoke softly, looked straight into my eyes, and there was something hypnotic in her voice. She could listen in a way that made every word I said feel important, and that's what hooked me. She wasn't just beautiful. She was fascinating. There was power in her, confidence, intelligence. She talked about life, about goals, about wanting a real relationship. No games, no lies. I believed her. And maybe that was my first mistake. The first few weeks were perfect. She texted me in the mornings, wished me a good day, said she missed me, sent me pictures of her coffee or her smile. We could talk for hours, laugh, make plans. But slowly, between her sweet words, something else began to slip through. Something cold and sharp. It started small. She'd say things like, "I just don't want you talking to those girls. They're not good for you." At first, it sounded like care, but hidden inside was control. Then came jealousy over my coworker, then my old friend, then even my group chats. She started saying I didn't give her enough attention, that I'd changed, that I wasn't the same anymore. And every time I tried to explain that I was just tired or busy with work, she'd get offended, at first quietly, then louder, and then with tears. So instead of resting after a hard day, I'd find myself standing in front of her, listening to accusations about how I didn't care anymore, while she played the role of the hurt victim perfectly. And then the switch. 30 minutes after the fight, she'd suddenly smile, come close, hug me and whisper, "I just love you so much. I can't stand feeling you drift away." And in that moment, everything else disappeared. She knew exactly when to be gentle, when to cry, when to laugh, when to accuse. Her emotions changed so fast, I couldn't even realize when she'd already turned me against myself. She could insult me, and minutes later become the sweetest woman in the world. And every time I apologized, because she knew how to make me believe it was my fault. "You just don't understand me," she'd say, and I started doubting myself. Was she right? Was I cold? Was I distant? That's how dependence begins, not from love, but from guilt. I stopped telling my friends about our fights because they saw her as perfect. In public, she was someone else entirely, kind, charming, funny. She knew exactly when to touch my hand, when to smile, so everyone would think we were the perfect couple. And I started convincing myself that maybe I was the problem, that maybe I just didn't know how to appreciate a woman who loved me so deeply. But somewhere inside, a crack had already formed, right between love and exhaustion. That thin line where affection turns into fear of doing something wrong. And I still didn't know that this was only the beginning, because this woman never wanted just love. She wanted more control, power, and the satisfaction of knowing that without her, I'd be nothing. I used to think control looked like shouting, jealousy, or open fights. But with her, it was different. It was quiet, calculated, disguised as care. It started when she told me she didn't feel comfortable around my friends. She said they didn't respect her, that they looked down on her. I tried to explain that they'd barely spoken to her, but she just sighed and said, "You never notice how people treat me." And somehow, I ended up canceling plans with my friends that night. Then the next, and then the one after that. Soon my phone stopped buzzing. No messages, no calls. My friends eventually stopped asking if I was free. And she noticed that too. She'd smile and say, "See, the world feels calmer now, doesn't it? Just you and me." That phrase, "just you and me," sounded romantic at first. Later, it felt like a sentence. I didn't realize she was building walls around me while making me believe it was protection. She told me who was toxic, who was fake, who didn't really care. But by the time I understood what was happening, I had no one left. Even my family started noticing. My sister told me once that I'd changed, that I was distant, distracted, nervous. I told her she was imagining things. But deep down, I knew she was right. Because whenever my sister texted me, my girlfriend would somehow know. She'd look at my phone and say, "Why is she texting you again?" She never liked me. It was easier to ignore my sister than to fight. That's what manipulation does. It doesn't break you all at once. It wears you down, one small compromise at a time, until your silence becomes your habit. She even started controlling how I dressed. "You look better in darker colors," she'd say. "Don't wear that shirt. It looks too friendly." At first, I thought she was just opinionated. But then I realized she wanted every piece of me to fit her version of who I should be. Every day became a test. If I smiled at a cashier, she'd go cold. If I came home 5 minutes late, she'd cry. If I didn't reply fast enough, she'd send 10 messages and then disappear for hours just to make me feel guilty. And every time she pulled away, I ran after her, because when she was gone, I felt empty, like she'd taken the air with her. The truth is, she didn't need to lock me in a cage. She'd already built one inside my mind. The only thing that mattered now was her approval, her smile, her touch, her rare moment of affection that felt like oxygen after drowning. But every time I finally caught my breath, she'd take it away again, just to remind me who really had control. I didn't know it yet, but she wasn't just isolating me. She was preparing me for something worse, a stage where love wouldn't be enough anymore, a stage where I'd start begging for the very things I used to take for granted: peace, trust, freedom. And by the time I realized it, I'd already forgotten what freedom even felt like. It's strange how love can turn into fear without you even realizing when it happens. There wasn't a moment when I said to myself that something was wrong. It just slowly became the air I breathed. Every morning began with tension. Every evening ended with explanations. She no longer needed to shout to control me. Silence worked better. Her silence was punishment. Her distance was threat. And her tears were the sharpest weapon she had. I began living for her moods, measuring my days by how she looked at me when I walked in the door. If her eyes were soft, I could breathe. If they were cold, the whole night was already ruined. One time, I tried to tell her that I felt suffocated, that we were drifting into something toxic. She stared at me for a long time, and then whispered that she never thought I'd hurt her like this. That single sentence broke me more than any scream could. She knew how to twist words until they became knives pointed inward. She made me believe that my desire to have a little space was cruelty, that my exhaustion was abandonment. I apologized again and again, and she accepted every apology like a queen granting mercy. Not out of love, but to remind me that I owed her my peace. Soon, everything I did became a potential betrayal. If I didn't answer her message right away, she would disappear for a day. When I asked what was wrong, she would reply that she needed time to think and that she felt unwanted. That phrase haunted me. I couldn't bear the thought of her feeling unwanted because she made me believe I was the only one who could save her from her own pain. And that's how she kept me. Every time she created distance, I chased it, tried to fix something I didn't even break. She cried often, and every tear was perfectly timed. She would cry right after saying something cruel, as if her tears erased the words. She'd tell me about her difficult childhood, her loneliness, how every man before me had hurt her, and how I was her only safe place. I used to feel lucky hearing that, until I realized that safe place meant I wasn't allowed to have feelings of my own. I existed to absorb her emotions, calm her storms, and rebuild her world each time she decided to destroy it. My friends became strangers. My family turned into background noise, and she became everything, the source of pain and the illusion of comfort at the same time. It wasn't love anymore, but I couldn't leave, because she had replaced my self-worth with her approval. If she was happy, I mattered. If she wasn't, I was worthless. I started waking up at night, checking my phone to see if she had texted, terrified of the silence that came before her next breakdown. She didn't need to threaten to leave. She just made me believe I couldn't live without her. And maybe that was the worst part. When someone makes you doubt your own strength, your own sense of reality, it's not just manipulation. It's a quiet kind of destruction that leaves no visible wounds, only emptiness where your voice used to be. I didn't recognize myself anymore. I smiled when I was supposed to, nodded when I was expected to, and apologized when silence felt too heavy. The person I used to be, confident, easygoing, open, felt like a stranger I'd once known. She'd taken that version of me apart piece by piece and built a new one, obedient, anxious, dependent. And every time I thought about leaving, I heard her voice in my head, soft, trembling, saying that she couldn't survive without me. And I stayed. not out of love, but out of guilt, because she'd made me believe that if I ever walked away, it wouldn't just break her heart, it would destroy her. It didn't happen all at once. It never does. Manipulation like hers grows quietly, in the spaces between truth and doubt, until one day you wake up realizing you can't tell them apart anymore. It started with small distortions. A phrase here, a story there, things that didn't seem important at first. She would tell me that one of my co-workers looked at her funny, that one of my friends said something disrespectful, that my sister rolled her eyes when she wasn't looking. She planted seeds, invisible at first, but poisonous. And because I loved her, because I wanted to protect her, I believed her. She told those same stories to others too, but differently. To my friends, she'd say I'd become distant, cold, irritable. She'd mention that I was struggling with stress, that she was worried about me. She said it sweetly, gently, like she cared, and that's what made everyone believe her. They didn't see the calculation behind those soft words, the way her eyes sparkled when she realized how easy it was to twist reality. Within weeks, my friends began looking at me differently. They stopped inviting me out as often. Some stopped entirely. I couldn't understand why, until one night, when I overheard two of them talking at a bar, saying that they didn't know how I treated her behind closed doors. Behind closed doors. That phrase burned in my head for days. It was the first time I realized she wasn't just manipulating me. She was rewriting the story for everyone else too. She wasn't satisfied with controlling me privately. She wanted control over how the world saw me. And it worked, because she was perfect at playing the victim. When people saw her, they saw vulnerability, delicate, emotional, misunderstood. No one saw the precision behind her sadness, the way she could summon tears in seconds if it helped her narrative. She cried in public once, outside a restaurant, in front of my friends. We had argued quietly inside about something meaningless, but she stormed out and collapsed onto the sidewalk, sobbing as if I'd just broken her heart in front of the world. People stared. My friends rushed to her. One of them glared at me, whispering, "What the hell did you do to her?" I didn't answer. I just stood there, frozen, humiliated, watching her create a scene that would follow me for months. The next day, she acted as if nothing had happened, humming in the kitchen while making coffee, smiling as if the night before had been a dream. And when I tried to bring it up, she tilted her head and said, "You're exaggerating again. It wasn't that bad." It's terrifying how easily a lie can become truth when you're the only one who knows the difference. Soon, I stopped correcting people. What was the point? Every time I tried to explain, I sounded defensive, desperate, like someone who actually had something to hide. She had turned me into a shadow of myself, a character in her story that she controlled with perfect timing. And the scariest part was that she didn't even seem angry anymore. She was calm, detached, like someone who'd already won. She began using my own kindness against me. She'd say things like, "I know you're trying. I just wish you didn't make me feel so unsafe sometimes." Unsafe. That word destroyed me. It made me question every word I spoke, every gesture, every look. Was I really that bad? Was I making her feel unsafe just by existing? I started filtering every move I made, lowering my voice, keeping my distance, overthinking every interaction. And she loved it. She loved the quiet obedience, the hesitation in my voice, the way I began apologizing before even knowing what for. Then she started showing up at my work. Not often, just enough to remind me she could. She'd bring coffee, smile to everyone, charm them effortlessly, and then later tell me how weirdly friendly some of my co-workers were. One time she left her scarf at my office on purpose. The next week, she told me a female colleague looked at it too long. That night, we argued for hours. She ended up crying again, saying she just wanted to feel safe and didn't know how to trust anymore. By the end, I was apologizing again, holding her, comforting her, the same woman who had built the whole situation from nothing. The cycle became endless. She'd accuse, I'd defend, she'd cry, I'd comfort. Then she'd repeat it all again with something new. She controlled my emotions so precisely that I began to anticipate her reactions before she even spoke. I knew when the storm was coming. I could feel it in the air, and yet I could never stop it. There's something deeply terrifying about realizing that someone has access to your mind in ways even you don't. She could trigger guilt, sadness, and fear with a single sentence. She didn't need to shout or threaten. She just had to withdraw affection, and my world collapsed. Because she had made me dependent on her validation. I didn't even want to impress her anymore. I just wanted peace. I just wanted the fighting to stop. But she didn't want peace. Peace meant balance. And balance meant I could start thinking for myself again. So she always kept just enough chaos to make sure I stayed in line. It reached a point where I avoided everyone who loved me, my friends, my family, even my co-workers. I couldn't handle their questions anymore. I didn't want to see the confusion in their eyes, or worse, their pity. Because how do you explain to someone that you're being destroyed by a person who swears they love you? And somewhere deep inside, I started to realize maybe she didn't just want to love her. Maybe she wanted to break me completely. Not out of hate, but out of something far colder, the need to prove that she could. That's when I understood what kind of woman she really was. She didn't want love. She wanted power. And I was the perfect victim. I don't know the exact moment when love turned into survival, but I remember the day I caught myself rehearsing sentences before speaking to her. Every word had to be perfectly balanced, not too soft, not too direct, not too long. I became fluent in silence, in hesitation, in the language of fear disguised as love. I started watching her eyes instead of listening to her words, because her gaze always told me who I had to be that day, the guilty one, the apologetic one, the savior, the villain. There were days when I'd wake up with a quiet ache in my chest, not because of something she'd done, but because I knew what she could do. It's strange how people say, "You should have left," as if leaving was a door you could just walk through. They don't understand that when someone breaks you slowly enough, the cage begins to feel like home. She trained me to doubt my own memories. If I said, "You yelled at me," she'd smile faintly and say, "You're too sensitive." If I said, "That hurt," she'd answer, "You always twist my words." Over time, I stopped trusting my own recollection of events. My reality began to depend on her approval. If she said it happened, it happened. If she said it didn't, I erased it. And when she noticed that power, that moment when I'd stopped defending myself, she softened again. That's what made it all so confusing. She became sweet, nurturing, calm. She told me I was her peace, her reason, her only stability. She said she wanted to fix things, that we'd gone through too much to give up now. I remember crying in her arms that night, believing, truly believing, that maybe things would go back to how they used to be. I wanted to believe the woman who laughed with me at midnight, not the one who tore me apart in the morning. For a few days, it felt like balance had returned. She kissed me more, texted me kind things, cooked dinner, said she was proud of me. I started feeling human again. But manipulation is never just control. It's rhythm. She gave me calm only to remind me later that she was the one who decided when peace could exist. It began again subtly. She'd disappear for hours and then reappear with some vague story. A friend, a meeting, a bad day. When I asked where she'd been, she'd tilt her head and say, "You're so controlling lately. Can't I have a life?" I remember the sting of that sentence, how it flipped everything upside down. I was the one suffocating. I was the one to blame. She'd taken every wound she caused and pinned it on me with surgical precision. Then came the apologies that meant nothing. She'd say sorry but twist it into guilt. "I'm sorry I make you feel this way. I guess I'm just too emotional for someone like you." It was never real remorse. It was a trap disguised as self-blame. Because the moment I tried to comfort her, she'd regain control again. I started realizing the pattern, but I didn't know how to stop it. It was like watching myself drown from the surface of the water. I could see it happening. Every manipulation, every twist of truth. And yet I couldn't move, because every time I tried to fight, she'd find the weak spots. She knew my fears, being alone, being misunderstood, being seen as cruel. So she painted every attempt to leave as abandonment. "You're just like everyone else," she'd whisper. "You pretend to care until it gets hard." And I stayed, because the thought of becoming the villain in her story terrified me more than the pain of staying in it. My world shrank until there was nothing left but her voice. Work felt meaningless. Friends were gone. Families stopped asking questions. I began to live in her emotional weather. Sunny one day, storm the next, never predictable. I'd wait for good days the way people wait for spring. And when they came, I'd tell myself, see, it's getting better. But deep down, I knew those good days were the bait, the illusion that kept me chained to hope. Sometimes late at night, I'd look at her while she slept and try to remember the person she was in the beginning, the woman who smiled with warmth, who asked about my dreams, who held my hand like it meant something. I'd wonder if she ever truly existed, or if she was just another part of the performance. But even then, even in those quiet moments of clarity, I couldn't hate her. That was the cruelest part. She'd broken me, and I still wanted to fix her. That's when I understood what real manipulation feels like. It's not anger or shouting or even control. It's dependency wrapped in love. It's the belief that maybe if you just love harder, they'll stop hurting you. But they don't. They just learn new ways to make you stay. And I did. I stayed. Because by then, she didn't need to trap me anymore. I had already built the prison myself. It happened on a night that was supposed to be ordinary. We were sitting on the couch, a movie playing softly in the background, her head resting on my shoulder, the illusion of peace wrapping around us like a blanket. For a moment, I let myself believe that maybe things were different now. But peace never lasted with her. It was always the calm before she needed to remind me who held the strings. The movie ended, and I said something small, I don't even remember what, something harmless, something about how tired I was. She went still. That silence, that sharp, suffocating silence. It returned like an old ghost. I could feel it crawling up my spine before she even spoke. And then, quietly, almost tenderly, she said that she could feel me drifting away again. I don't know what was about that moment, but something inside me cracked. Maybe it was the exhaustion, or maybe I was finally too empty to care about the outcome. I looked at her and said that she couldn't keep doing this, that I was tired of walking on eggshells, tired of being the villain in a story I didn't write. The air froze between us. For the first time, she didn't cry or yell. She just stared at me. That look, the cold, hollow look, it was like watching someone remove their mask and reveal what's been underneath all along. She asked if I was calling her manipulative. I said I didn't know what else to call it. And then she laughed. Not the laugh I used to love, not soft or warm, but cruel, sharp, deliberate. She said I was paranoid, that I needed help, that I twisted everything in my head. She said no one would believe me if I ever tried to make her look bad. The worst part was I knew she was right. She had built her reputation perfectly. Everyone thought she was gentle, kind, fragile. If I told anyone what she'd done, they'd see me as unstable, bitter, even abusive. She'd already planted those seeds months ago. In small comments, half-truths, concerns she'd voiced to my friends. I didn't see it then, but she'd been preparing for this moment all along. I stood up, shaking. For the first time, I didn't apologize. I said I needed space. She didn't move. She just smiled faintly and said, "You won't last a week without me." And there was something about the way she said it. Calm, certain, not like a threat, but like a fact. That sent a chill through me. I wanted to leave right then, but fear pinned me in place, because a part of me still believed her. The next few days were hell. She went silent again, disappearing for hours, then reappearing as if nothing happened. Every time my phone buzzed, my chest tightened. I was addicted to her absence as much as her presence. She knew it too. She'd post pictures online, smiling, radiant, surrounded by friends. Small, subtle reminders that she was fine without me, that I was replaceable. But then late at night, she'd message something like, "I miss you," or "I can't sleep without you." I'd fall right back into the cycle, answering, apologizing, trying to make things right even when I didn't know what wrong was anymore. One night, I finally told her I couldn't do it anymore, that I needed to get my life back. She called me cold, said I was abandoning her like everyone else had. She said I didn't understand her trauma, that I was punishing her for being broken. And those words hit me like a knife because she knew exactly where to cut. The guilt, the empathy, the need to be the good one. She turned every boundary into cruelty, every attempt to leave into betrayal. I tried to block her number once. My hand was shaking. Within an hour, she called me from another phone, crying, saying she was outside my apartment and didn't know where else to go. I let her in. I always did. She sat on my floor, crying into her hands, telling me she'd die without me, that I was the only person who ever loved her right. And I believed it again, not because I thought it was true, but because I didn't want to risk being the one who proved it wasn't. That night, after she fell asleep beside me, I sat in the dark staring at the wall, realizing how deep I'd fallen. I couldn't tell if I stayed because I loved her, or because she convinced me that I'd become a monster if I didn't. That's what she was best at, not destroying people directly, but making them destroy themselves. She'd built a world where leaving her meant becoming the bad guy, and I had played my role perfectly. The truth is, by the time you realize you're being manipulated, it's already too late, because you've spent so long defending the person hurting you that you've forgotten how to defend yourself. I kept waiting for some clear moment of escape, some signal, some push from the universe that would give me strength to walk away. But it never came. The only thing that grew louder was her voice in my head, whispering that no one else would ever love me like she did. And the most terrifying part of all was that I was starting to believe it. The night it all ended didn't feel dramatic at first. It didn't start with a fight or shouting or slammed doors. It started with silence, a silence so heavy it felt like the air itself refused to move. She was sitting across the room, scrolling on her phone, the glow lighting her face in that soft, familiar way. I looked at her and felt something strange. Not love, not anger, not even sadness. Just emptiness. For months I had begged for peace, for stability, for some sense of control over my own life. And in that moment, I realized that peace would never exist as long as she did. I'd spent so long trapped in her storm that calm started to feel wrong. Whenever things were quiet, my mind waited for her voice, sharp, accusing, manipulative, to remind me that I didn't deserve rest. But that night, for the first time, she wasn't speaking. She was just there. And in that stillness, I finally heard something else. My own thoughts. It hit me how much I'd lost. Friends who stopped calling. A sister I hadn't spoken to in months. Dreams that used to mean something. Gone. My laughter, my energy, my self-respect, all absorbed into her endless hunger for control. She had taken everything that made me me, and left behind an echo that existed only to serve her moods. And still, even after everything, I was scared to leave, because she had convinced me that walking away would make me cruel. The realization came slowly, like light bleeding through a crack. Every lie she'd ever told, every guilt she'd planted, every tear she'd weaponized, they all started replaying in my head, not as isolated moments, but as pieces of one long strategy. She hadn't just manipulated me. She'd rebuilt my world so that she was its center. I remembered the way she'd tell stories about her exes, all of them villains, all of them abusers. I used to feel sorry for her. But now, I wonder if those stories had been rehearsals. Each man before me just another character in her script. And I was the next one she needed to destroy to keep her story alive. I don't know what made me stand up that night. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe it was instinct, or maybe it was a small piece of myself that she hadn't managed to kill. I told her I was leaving. The words didn't come out strong. They trembled, cracked, barely louder than a whisper, but they were real. She looked up from her phone, her eyes narrowing, a smile curling at the corner of her mouth. "You're not going anywhere," she said. Her voice wasn't angry. It was calm, confident, like she was stating a fact. And for a second, I almost believed her, because she had always been right before. She'd always predicted exactly how I would react, what I would say, when I would break. But not this time. Something in me shifted. Not courage exactly, but clarity. I told her that I couldn't keep living like this, that I had lost everything because of her, that I didn't even recognize myself anymore. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just laughed, that cold, empty laugh I'd heard before, and said, "You'll come back. You always do. She stood up, crossed the room, and placed her hand on my chest. You need me, she whispered. And in that moment, I saw everything clearly. The manipulation, the pity, the illusion of love she'd used to keep me chained. It was never about love. It was about power, about control, about making someone so afraid of being alone that they'd rather live in a cage than face freedom. I stepped back. For the first time, she looked unsure. I told her no, just that one word. Simple, quiet, final. And she froze. She tried everything after that. Tears, apologies, promises, even threats. She said she'd hurt herself if I left, that she couldn't live without me. For a second, that old panic rushed through me, the fear that I was responsible for her pain. But then I realized something that finally broke the spell. She wasn't crying because she loved me. She was crying because she was losing control. I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't look back. The night air hit me like a shock, cold and sharp, and I stood there for a long time just breathing. For months, I had forgotten what real air tasted like, air that wasn't filtered through her voice, her judgment, her need. My hands were shaking, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was release. The next morning, she started the war. Messages, calls, emails, voice notes, all crafted with precision. Some were filled with love, some with hatred, some with guilt. She told everyone that I had abandoned her, that I was unstable, heartless, broken. She called my family, my friends, even my co-workers. By the end of the week, the damage was done. She destroyed my reputation before I even had a chance to rebuild myself. But strangely, I didn't care, because for the first time in a long time, the noise wasn't inside my head anymore. She could twist the truth. She could turn people against me. But she couldn't reach me now. I had walked away, not from her, but from the version of myself she created. Recovery wasn't instant. The nights were long. The silence was heavy. I had to relearn what it meant to wake up without fear, to eat without tension, to speak without rehearsing every word. I started therapy. I reconnected with people who thought I'd disappeared for good. Some understood, some didn't. It didn't matter. The important thing was that I was learning to exist again. But the hardest part wasn't forgiving her. It was forgiving myself for staying so long, for believing the lies, for confusing manipulation with love. People always talk about red flags, as if they're easy to see. They're not. When you love someone like her, the red flags look like roses. You think you're holding something beautiful until the thorns remind you what's real. Months passed. I still dream about her sometimes. In those dreams, she's exactly the same, soft, beautiful, smiling, saying she missed me. But even in those dreams, I feel nothing, just quiet recognition. Because I know what that smile hides now. I know the price it demands. I used to think leaving her would break me, but staying would have killed me, slowly, silently, piece by piece. And sometimes survival doesn't look like strength. Sometimes it looks like walking away while your heart still begs you to stay. So this is where my story ends. Not with revenge, not with closure, but with truth. The truth that some people don't love you. They consume you. They drain you until there's nothing left, and then they call it devotion. And if you're ever in that place, trapped between guilt and fear, between love and control, I hope you remember this. Love that requires you to lose yourself isn't love. It's imprisonment dressed as affection. So now, when I think of her, I don't feel hatred. I feel gratitude. Because she taught me something no one else could. The difference between being loved and being used. And that, finally, is enough.